Hi, everyone. Welcome again to today's training. Uh, Thank you so much for joining. Today's session will be on working with the press and how to become a spokesperson. So I'm Afifa, and this afternoon we have joining us Natalia from 350 Global Comms team who will be facilitating the session. So please help me welcome Natalia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Natalia. I work with the global communications team at 350.org. And I'm happy to facilitate this media and spokespeople training with you all today. Should I start, Afifa? Yeah?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So first of all, we have 11 people on the call. I would like to invite who feel comfortable to either speak up or put in the chat your name and where you're from, because I know this group is spread across the Caribbean region. So it would be good to know where you're all from. So I'm just gonna give you a couple of seconds to type it on the chat or to speak up. In the meantime, can you pass the slides, Afifa, please? Hi, Kenya, thank you. While people introduce themselves, I'd like to familiarize with this online training. So I invite you to be comfortable with using the various options that we have. Have a drink handy, sit comfortable and be ready for conversation. Keep your video on if you feel comfortable enough to do so. If not, that's completely fine too. Mute your microphone while you're not speaking and ask any questions anytime in the chat box or put a star in the chat. So if you want to speak, so we can see you. Let's make this a healthy space for exchange and not only passive listening. So yeah, I invite you all to engage and be fully present here with me. So I see Kenya, I see Nicola, Katrina, Christian, Amira, Andriska. Sorry if I'm not spelling your names correctly. And Afifa. Hi, everyone. So what we'll cover today, we'll do some practical work in the second half of the training. And first of all, I'd like to introduce you to some tactics and why we use the media and how to develop some messages and some interview tips and tricks as well. Next. So why do we use the media? Stories move us, right? They spring us into action, they resonate, and they can have a multiplying effect. So you can reach new audiences beyond your communities, your networks. They can shape, change, and shift the public debate and people's behaviors. We can pass on messages through the media, so we can use the media as a channel for our causes. And especially broadcast media, which is radio and television, is the most consumed form of media nowadays. So media is going to tell a story anyway. So better if it comes from us than from our opposition. So communicators should use the platforms to activate our base, our supporters, and people that think alike us. Persuade the middle, what we have in a spectrum, our base and supporters, our the opposition, and the middle, which are either people who doesn't have enough information about a specific topic, and because of that haven't had a solid, a consolidated opinion about an issue, or if they're not decided yet on an issue. So we should persuade them and bring arguments to convince them that our story is the true and is the best side to be on. So although it might feel like your ideas are always the minority in an interview, because we know how media is set up to work these days, media is a vehicle for you to speak to your public, and the public may be more sympathetic or persuadable or on a specific side than those voices that are more established in a newsroom. So it's always worthy to put our messages out there. Next. So how do we bring equity, the equity lens to storytelling? We recognize that the media landscape is often dominated by the privileged ones and those with most access. Currently, most people you see on the media are white, middle class, and cisgender men. And this representation creates a power imbalance in the media, where some people feel entitled to be the voice on certain issues. And this also applies to the newsrooms, where the demographic is also often middle class, white, and educated people. And this replicates the culture codes of those groups. Many other different groups. And this is hostile to working class people and people of color, disabled people, LGBTQ plus folks. So people from marginalized backgrounds can therefore find it hard to be comfortable enough doing media work. And they often feel like they aren't the best persons for the job. So what do we want to change? We want to open the space for everyone to tell their own stories in their own words. We want to pass on the microphone, and we want to make opportunities accessible for everyone, and by supporting each other. So you may hear my daughter screaming and crying in the background, but I hope it doesn't derail our presentation. Next, please. So what does healthy storytelling looks like? Enabling people to speak for themselves, not imposing a specific pace or a specific mode or a specific language, building relationships for the long term. So to be like reliable sources and to make people feel they are capable of doing that, you must build trust and build longer relationships. Nothing about us without us. Just give the microphone to people who are experiencing things on the ground, who can tell the true stories of how what things are impacting them and how it's impacting them. Don't give the microphone to someone else to tell their own stories. Reciprocity. Storytelling free from harmful stereotypes, so avoid stereotypes, and honoring the effort, the risk, and the vulnerability required to share stories, because we all know that many environmental defenders and people who fight for social justice, climate justice, racial justice, gender justice are often threatened, sometimes with death threats, and we need to be very careful on who do we bring to the spotlight and which are the specific outlets that we should trust to put someone in the spotlight to tell their stories. Next. So what media wants? The job of the media is to tell a story, and they need to be accurate, useful, timely information that will connect with their readers, their listeners, and their viewers, so their audience in general. They need a reliable source of information. So they need to know that we can be trustworthy and reliable, and that we have the expertise they need to be speaking about specific issues. And they also need good visuals and or good sound bites. So if you're giving an interview by Zoom or WhatsApp or whatever online platform, make sure that you check the tech, the technicalities behind it, so you have a good image or a good sound. Next. Understanding journalists and making context. We usually find journalists like people that are difficult to reach because they are very busy, or they are very serious, or they are popular, I don't know, but they are human. And don't fear them. Sometimes they are intimidated because of the questions and their posture and behavior, but they are also human beings. And if they're coming to us, it's because they need us. So use that in our favor, in your favor. Next. Second thing, building relationships with journalists are important, but also are knowing your media outlets, either in the local, regional, or the international level. So whenever there's a media request, or there's an event that you want to get media attention, do a research and on your local and regional media scene to try to understand what are the outlets that you want to reach, which audiences they will reach, that you want to capture as well, which outlets and journalists are covering specific stories that you want them to tell, which climate stories they are already covering. So reach out to specific people that you know are already telling the story, either in a good or a bad way, in a right or wrong way, because we can also always change what they are telling if what they're telling is not on the right sense. So a few tips to try to understand your media landscape. You can create a Google News alert so you can monitor and keep up to date with stories on the media. It can be daily or weekly or bi-weekly. Create and keep an updated media list is also very important, and you can ask a friendly NGO to do that for you, and 350 is here to help you out with that as well. And the use of social media channels is also very important these days, because every journalist, every outlet has a social media profile and account. So you can, Twitter, for instance, is very useful for media outreach. So do make use of the social media as well. Next. Guys, I'm not seeing the chat, so please jump in if you have any questions or if I'm going too fast. Okay, so let's now get into the shoes of a journalist. So journalists have multiple stories a day. They have a time crunch with always a short deadline. They are short on space and airtime. Editors to convince, because sometimes they want to push forward a story or an angle, but they need to convince their own editors. They have information overload versus the hard news. They are undersourced, and sometimes they are a bit lazy. So generally, they have also resource constraints. So, and that's why they rely too much on us, on our expertise. And knowing their situation help us sympathize with them and understand their rush and yeah, why they have such a short deadline, or why do you give a 20 minutes interview and only 20 seconds of it goes to the news and all that. So building relationship with journalists are also important to connect in a human side as well. Next. So messaging. What is important to build our own messaging and why is it important? So we use messaging to as I mentioned before, to activate our base, persuade the middle, and show the opposition how they're isolated in their own spectrum. So in this session, we will discuss the tips and do a short practical exercise, and then we will share messages with the larger group, if that's okay for everyone. Next. So I'm not sure if you're all familiarized with Marge Simpson. If not, please shout out. But Marge is a character, a very famous character from American film. Sorry, I forgot the name. Anyways, and she's basically a middle-class housewife that doesn't question much her husband, or doesn't have a job and lives for her children and her home. So if you can imagine a Marge Simpson in your own life, picture this person. Is it your dad, your grandma, or your cousin, or a friend? Have a Marge Simpson in your life. And so just to explain a little bit further, what we call Marge Simpson is people that don't usually understand jargons or acronyms or concepts that we use in our workplace or a specific campaign, because they don't work with us or they don't have anything similar to our work. So they are not used to what we do. So they don't understand. And we need to explain that very clearly. And if you just throw numbers and statistics at them, they will switch off, because most people switch off when they don't understand numbers and statistics, and you just throw it on them without.
This sounds like my mom.
We all have a Marge Simpson in our lives. That's for true. And they will probably respond best to you, including some sort of story to illustrate what you're saying, or something that you tell that resonates with them, like values that they share, values that this person shares with you. So if you could think of someone, and when you're trying to tell a story, try to tell every time for the Marge Simpson in your life, because that will make things easier for you. You're going to explain better, give better examples, and make people feel more engaged and more, and that will resonate more with them. So they will be more interested. It's everything good so far?
Okay. Yeah, excellent.
Okay, thank you. So next. So top things to remember about Marges. They don't like or they don't understand jargons or concepts or assumptions like COP, climate justice, intersectionality, reparations, just transition, this kind of concepts that we use every day in our work, but it's not something that they can assimilate easy. They don't understand acronyms and abbreviations. So what is COP? it's the climate conference, the UN conference on climate change or something. Like every time try to explain what you're trying to say. And don't talk as if you're talking to your colleagues or comrades or fellow activists. Talk to someone that doesn't understand this world. Next. So now I propose an exercise, talking to your Marge. So I propose that we describe a campaign or a specific project that you're working on and try to explain this issue as if you're talking to your Marge. Limit jargons and statistics, include a story, like a real story, a human story, to illustrate it. And if you don't have, or you're not involved in any campaign, just choose an issue, a topic that's important to you, or a story in the news, and try to think of how did you find talking about this issue in that way for a Marge in your life. And so we can spend 2 minutes in this topic. People can think about it and maybe write down some lines, and then we can share back in the group if folks feel comfortable. How does that sound? Good? Okay, cool. Let's just give people 2 minutes then. Do people need 1 more minute? Will we have any volunteers to share their insights?
Everyone can feel free to raise their hands and unmute. Okay, then I'm going to go first. So hi everyone, I'm Katrina from Trinidad and Tobago, and apart from my work with CCN, I actually am a mermaid. So the whole thing is that when I was a child, I really loved mermaids and I loved the ocean, so I always wanted to be a marine biologist. And with that, I wanted to start teaching marine biology for kids to understand with a mermaid character. So it came about in a couple of ways, in that I wanted to make sure that children were able to understand the concepts of marine biology. So I broke it down in the simplest terms with a cartoon, and created books, videos, and I'm hopefully going to go into more things to come. And the whole aim of this was that I would be able to encourage the next generation to be aware and embrace the environment and the ocean, as a way for us to continue living sustainably on the planet. So yeah, that was my 2 minutes. I hope it was simple enough.
That was great. Actually, the metaphor of a mermaid is perfect because you bring something that has a fantastic, a fantastic side that can captivate people's feelings, and sometimes brings a memory from childhood, from cartoons. So this is something that people can refer back and can imagine. Yes, exactly. They're super cute. So this is also like when you're speaking to children, it's very characteristic. Like when you bring an element of something that is not real, but also something that speaks to their own reality, the way they see the world, the way they imagine things. So this resonates with them. So you need to always bring something that will resonate with the audience you're trying to reach. So this is perfect. Anyone else feeling like sharing? Otherwise, we can just jump to the next slide. I don't see anyone. That's okay, no problem. Just try to keep in mind the marges in your life and try to keep it simple. That's the bottom line of this exercise. Try to keep it simple, and don't assume that you're speaking to the same people that work with you and that understands what you do. Come from a place where people don't know what you're talking about. So explain to them in the most simple way. All right. Creating a common ground. That's exactly what I was speaking. So we need to establish a connection with our audience. And need to be appealing to shared compassionate values and a shared identity. So when you speak from an universalized way, you create an idea of solidarity and shared humanity. You speak from the collective and not from the I, right? So it's always best to speak, we all want a better world for future generations, instead of I want a better world. So when you bring the collective to what you're speaking, you create a common ground and show people that this is important not only for you, but for your community, for the world. So yeah, there's a couple of examples there. What we can all agree on is that we need to reduce carbon emissions. No matter where we come from, most of us need a healthy planet. We all deserve, or we all have a right to clean air, right? So when spokespeople speak from their own perspective, like, as a climate activist, I feel like you marginalize. So people think, I'm not a climate activist, so this isn't relevant to me. I don't understand this. I don't want to engage with this. I'm not interested because I'm not from the same world or the same bubble as this person. So it may sometimes be strategic to name agency and accountability, or explicitly raise up marginalization. But most of times when we universalize the topic and use the collective, we create this common ground which people which resonates more with people. Next. So always talk about what you want to talk about. That's the reason why we need clear messaging. Stay on your message. Don't respond to attacks from the opposition, and set your own agenda. Even when an interview is a difficult one with tricky questions, if you stay on your message, they won't trick you. So hit your key messages early on, also because, as I said previously, journalist doesn't have too much space. So if you're giving an interview, try to hit the key messages in the first minutes of the interview, and get them into your first answer if you can. So they will be in the front, and we will have more chances to be shared live. Next. So here I share a few tips to create your own key messages, but there's also, I don't know if Amira, Afifa, or Katrina will share this presentation with you afterwards, but we have a media toolkit. There's a link here. It's very comprehensive. It explains and has templates of all the main communications outputs, press releases, media advisories, everything that you need to reach out to media. So if you need to use the media toolkit, please feel free to use that. But when you're putting together your key messages, what do you need to do? You need to speak to people's best self. So good, compassionate sides of people. The audience is not the villain. So don't paint them as the problem. Don't be angry or mad at the audience. The issue you were speaking about and the causes we defend are usually hit our nerves, but they are not the villain. They are just the channel through which we want to pass on our message. So remember that. Try to create the common ground. Find the identity and values you share with that audience. So, for instance, if you know there's a mainstream outlet that you are speaking to, what are the shared values that they have? Sometimes it's just like using a metaphor of something that we will understand better, like guns, or the use of guns, or just sexual abuse, because everyone has children, daughters, and sons, so they can identify with what you're saying. So try to use metaphors that create this common ground and create this identity that speaks to their values. Also, sometimes you are speaking to a younger audience. Try to use examples that they will identify in their own lives as well. Talk about change. Explain the problem, but also present the solution. This is very important, especially in those days that life is tough. Life is very difficult, and everyone is going through some problem in their own lives. So if you just bring up more problem, they will not be engaged with that or want to join our cause or our campaign, because if there's no solution, there's nothing to be done, right? So you always bring a solution. There is a solution. There's something you can do at your homes, and that's why we are speaking to you. Always use facts in stories. So don't rely on figures alone. Appeal to people's emotions rather than rational. Always, every time you can, just put a human face on the issue. Tell a true story of someone that is real. And try not to respond directly to your opponent's claims. Sorry. Don't rephrase claims that you don't support when you're replying to something. So, for instance, for the climate crisis, the urgency of the climate crisis requires a new approach. and a just response that is centered on human rights, equity, and justice. So use this, create this common ground, try to bring the collective, and every time you can, bring a solution and a true story that people can identify with. Next. What are the top things that your key messages needs to be? They need to be short and concise. It should be read or spoken in 30 seconds or less. They need to be sharp and strategic. Define, differentiate, and address the benefits of what you're saying. It needs to be simple. Use easy to understand language. Avoid jargons and acronyms. It needs to be relevant. Balance what you need to communicate with what your audience needs to know. And it needs to be memorable, like something easy to recall and repeat. So avoid long and run-on sentences. And it needs to be real. So use active voice, not passive. Speak from your heart. Speak from the collective to the collective. Next. And also, whenever you can, try to include a phrase that pays. Is something visual that will stick in people's minds and resonate. Like, the US has driven a wrecking ball through the UN climate talks. This is something, is a metaphor of a sports metaphor that is something easy to understand for the mainstream, and is something that sticks to our mind. You keep that image in your mind when you remember what you heard. So it will often be a metaphor or imagery that will stick in people's minds. And you want to say this phrase at least once in the interview, but quite likely a few times during the interview. And it can also be really short, like literally just a phrase rather than a whole sentence. And it might involve rhyme or alliteration as a means of making sticky, and which means it like it's in people's minds. Use statistics, use stories wherever possible, but having some data is also very useful, because you prove when people bring numbers, it's kind of a proof that this is true. But remember, you need to bring data and statistics and numbers, but explaining them, not just throwing them on people. You're never going to win an argument on statistics alone. And for many people, hearing big numbers it simply alienates them from the debate. So we recommend using stories to illustrate the numbers. So you must always make sure that your numbers are 100% correct. Don't bring incorrect information, any kind of incorrect information. Because it can derail a whole interview and end up undermining your point. If you don't know something, just don't say it. Don't speak about it. And if you're asked something you don't know how to respond, you can say exactly this. I'm not 100% sure about your this answer, so I will come back to this later. You can say that. People don't know everything, so that's fair enough. And stories. So just bring stories that people can relate to, and it will enable us to engage and yeah, sympathize with what we're saying. Yeah, just whenever possible, humanize and personalize what you're saying. Always bring the human side. Next. So now it's a bit of some tricks and tips for how to bridge tricky questions. We have something that we call ABC, which is acknowledge, bridge, and communicate. So first of all, acknowledge their point, bridge away from it, and communicate what you want to say. So politicians do that a lot. Keep your body language and your facial language in check. Don't turn your eyes, just acknowledge the question and try to bridge that to what you want to say. And ways to answer that is like, I see that, but so sometimes people say that, oh, for climate strikes, young people should be in schools rather than being on the streets protesting. Don't you agree? So this is a tricky question, right? This is provocative. So the way you bridge that is saying, I see that, but like young generations are going to own this world, and it's their heritage, so they are fighting for what they deserve. This is something that you acknowledge, you bridge away, and then you communicate your message. So there's a couple of examples on how to answer that. What I'm most worried about is not they missing school, is they having a livable planet in the future. So there's a couple of ways of doing that. Okay, and always remember, you have the right to say no or refer the question to someone else if you don't feel comfortable enough with that question. Another very important thing is not to panic or pretend to hold the calm in all cases. You can say, I need more time to think about your question, and then I can come back to you later on. You can pause and just say, give me 1 minute to think about it, and then continue. And in your response, do not repeat any negative questions from the journalist, because it will stick to people's minds. Just acknowledge that, but don't repeat it, and then bridge to what you have to say. Next. Any questions here? Because I know it's a lot of information. No?
It just seems that we have to be very diplomatic.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Because we always need to remember that we are speaking to our audiences, to people outside the screens, and not to the journalist. We are using the journalist or the vehicle or the outlet as a channel, as a vehicle to our message. And our messages are going to the public. So if the journalist is a jerk, just ignore them and pass on the message. That's what's important there. Okay, so I have another group exercise proposal now. We have 3 scenarios here, and I would like people to choose one and try to think of, try to come up with a few key messages for one of these chosen scenarios. And you can think about, when you're trying to write down your key messages, what are the shared values? What is the problem? What is the impact that is having, that this issue is having in the world? What is the way forward in addressing it, bringing in the solution? What are you doing about it? And what is the phrase that pays? So I don't know how much time do we have, Afifa? Can you remember me that? So we can give people, I don't know, 3 to 5 minutes to write down and then share back.
Sure. We plan to go up to 7:30. It's like 6:52 on our end at the moment. So we have a little over 30 minutes. Well, 30 to 35.
Okay, so let's give people 3 minutes to choose one of these scenarios and try to think about 2 or 3 key messages, and I will post on the chat the prompt questions for you to think about. Okay. The third option is just choose your own scenario, like something that you're working on, that your group is dealing with, and just come up with key messages. And when you're sharing, you can explain this scenario to us. Do people need more time, or should we begin? Do we have a volunteer to share, or will be Katrina again?
Yeah, because you know I'm ready already.
Okay, I see Andrishka. Is that correct?
Yes, I'll go after this person.
Okay, great. No problem. So again, Katrina here, and I chose the second one. The IPCC is releasing its latest report on climate change, and the results show urgent need for reducing carbon emissions. So our shared values are that we all know from the science-based information available that the IPCC is working with the best estimates and scenarios that are available and showing that climate change is going to be one of the biggest problems faced by our collective human experience of the earth. So the problem is that we are emitting carbon into the atmosphere at a rate that is higher than ever before emitted. The concentration of carbon in the atmosphere is going up, and this in turn is leading to so many different impacts. It's affecting our temperatures, which is in turn affecting sea level rise. It's affecting the flow of the ocean, the temperature, sea surface temperature, temperature of the air, the amount of extreme weather that we're having. And the thing is, the Caribbean is because we are small island developing states mostly, or that most of our coastlines are large, we are inadvertently vulnerable to these changes. And the way forward is that because the Caribbean also has a very small impact, we not only have to look at our adaptation towards the climate crisis, but we also have to lobby for the governments that are of these countries that are emitting the most and actually changing the climate to take our situations into consideration, especially with the 1.5 degrees Celsius, 1.5 to stay alive. For those of you who know, it's a campaign. That's what we're doing about it right now. We were campaigning that these governments see that we need to cap that global temperature rise to only 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial era. And it is what it is. We need that 1.5 to stay alive. That's the phrase that pays. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. So I will briefly give a feedback and then Andrishka can share too. So I thought it was really good. You brought the problem, you brought a lot of facts, you shared data and why this is impacting the emissions raising are impacting the oceans and people's real lives. You explained the problem in very simple and short and concise way. You brought the story side of it as well. You brought the story on your own, from your own region, like how it's impacting the Caribbean region specifically. So this makes people understand and identify with that. So it's not only happening in the North Pole. This is happening here right now, close to you, with concrete examples of impacts in your region. And I love the phrase that pays, 1.5 to stay alive. It's like really sharp, strategic, simple, and sticky. So it was really good. Thank you. Andrishka, over to you.
Hello, everyone. I chose the third one, and I didn't answer, what's the problem? Well, I didn't answer in order. I'm not going to answer in the order that was presented in the chat, but I hope that all the elements will be present. So I'm a part of this movement called A Fair Deal for Guyana, and it was started in 2018. It was formed in response to oil companies and other extractive bodies coming to Guyana with aims of investing in and benefiting from our natural resources, particularly our oil. And in seeking to benefit from our natural resources, these oil companies have been striking bogus deals that disregard the Guyanese people and the environment. And in doing so, these deals that are being struck allow the oil companies to extract to their heart's delight with very little checks and balances on their processes of extraction by the government. So there's a lot of flaring, there's a lot of pollution, and a fair deal aims to make the government of Guyana and the oil companies obey the laws of Guyana and to protect the environment for future and present generations. In fulfilling this aim, the movement generates legal cases which challenge the government and oil companies to get a fair deal for Guyana. And a fair deal for Guyana is essentially a fair deal for the planet in that it empowers other developing countries not to cower before these big oil giants that may threaten them or that may make them feel small and insignificant. By having these continuous legal cases, it proves to them that they're capable of action and that they're capable of standing up for their own countries. And I think that that is very important for every developing nation to know.
Thanks, Andrishka. This is also really good. You brought the problem, you explained the problem. You also shared the impacts that this is having in the communities around you. And you brought like the way forward, the solutions, right? What people need to do about it, what people can do about it. So you shared the legal cases that are challenging the government. This is something that the groups are doing, and this is something that people who wants to be engaged can do. So you brought the solution as well, and what you are already doing about it. And I love, I'm not sure you use it as the phrase that pays, but I captured that and it stick it to my mind. And you said, a fair deal for Guyana is a fair deal for the planet. And that's really good. Yeah. So I got it right. And exactly, you didn't need to explain that to me. Like, that captured my attention. So this was really good. Okay, so the movement is already doing very good, because this is a great one. And it's like how do we call that? Sorry, because I'm a Brazilian. I'm based in Rio, and so English is not my native language. So I sometimes forget the names, the words. But anyway, yeah, it's a really good one. Thanks. Anyone else wants to share? Otherwise, we can go to the next slide, Afifa, please. Yeah, so the next is actually the questions that I wrote. So we're moving now to media interviews. Next slide, I brought an example of an interview that Angela Valenzuela, one of the climate strikers from Colombia, gave to Democracy Now!, which is a live broadcast in the US. So let's just play it, please.
1 second. Let me just check the volume, because
Okay.
Yeah, share sound.
You've just come from Chile. Angela, you've just come from Chile. Now, it's so interesting, as this march is about to take place here in Spain, if there's going to be a simultaneous march in Chile. So you were going to host the UN Climate Summit there, but then the protests led to its cancellation. Talk about the significance of this.
Well, so as Fridays for Future as well in Chile, we have been mobilizing for the whole year and hoping that people in Chile will wake up. And it's very inspiring to see like the whole movement that had started since October for the social crisis, and people woke up, and that's very inspiring. But at the same time, it's terrifying to see how we're getting all the repression from the state and human rights violations that are happening until today. So I think partly it was like a very strategic move to change the COP from Santiago to Madrid, because since it was suspended in Chile, the international mainstream media is not really talking about Chile anymore. And now it's been shocking for me to participate at COP and going inside and seeing all the greenwashing that I already knew that it was going to happen, but now it's also about human rights. And the speech that Sebastián Piñera sent in a video for the first day at COP was terrible. He was saying that
Chilean President Piñera, who canceled the COP in Chile.
Exactly. And I think if COP was going to take place in Santiago, he was forced to listen to people and to hear their demands and try to solve the situation in a more democratic way. But he was not willing to do that. That's clear. And that's what's saddening. But at the same time, I feel that this needed to happen in Chile. And it's really inspiring to see all people very empowered. And now we have the chance to write a new constitution from zero to get rid of Pinochet's constitution. So that's very meaningful, and we are achieving more than we thought we could, like maybe 3 months ago.
Are you sorry he canceled the COP? Were you shocked when he announced it? I mean, you had hundreds of thousands of people in the streets protesting austerity, protesting inequality. He canceled both the APEC summit, the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit, and the COP.
I had mixed feelings. I still don't have like one position, because from one side is like you see how people is empowered and they can like take down 2 massive projects that the government had and had been planning for a long time that were very meaningful. So people felt really like empowered that they could have that impact. At the other side, like I come from the social, like the environmental movement. So we had been like pushing for this like awareness and this movement for the whole year. So it was a shock, and we all felt like this bad impression of the decision, understanding that Sebastián, like our president, was not willing to listen to people and to have an open dialogue.
Talk about the connection between the climate catastrophe that we are all facing, the climate crisis, and human rights violations in Chile, particularly around the rights, for example, of indigenous people like the Mapuche.
Yeah, well, in Chile, the Mapuche, like even like for centuries, have been like facing the oppression of the state and human rights violations. And I think we have to learn from them in order to cope with the climate crisis. They have a different paradigm. They have answers that we need to look at and respect. And if you see in the protests, what's been super interesting is that there are many flags with the indigenous, like Mapuche flag, more than Chilean flags. So that's a sign that we need to redefine our culture, and we are like looking back into our roots for answers. So that's super inspiring. And then I wanted also to touch on like the human rights violations that are tied with the climate crisis and the fossil fuel industry, because something that's very huge in Chile is that we have sacrifice zones. So these are communities that are forced to live right next to coal plants, and that this is one of the issues that we have been bringing throughout the year with the social and environmental movements. And we are demanding that they close down coal plants by 2030, all 28 coal plants. And I guess it's just important to call attention that now, for example, ENGIE, that is one of the founders of COP25, is now retracting from investing into renewable energy and the plan for decarbonizing our energy system. Like justifying itself that now the economic crisis in Chile is coming, and etc.
Okay, so this was Angela, and if you pay attention to the last question, the reporter asked about the connection between human rights and the climate crisis. And then Angela used the question to convey the key message about the relationship between climate and human or indigenous rights violations, with the example of the Mapuches in Chile. And also, especially with naming the villains, naming the fossil fuel industry as the main cause of human rights violations and the climate crisis. So she used it, she pivoted the question to what she wanted to communicate. And she also mentioned very explicitly the demands of the movement. She said, we want to stop a couple, I don't recall the exact number she said right now, but she mentioned we want to stop a few coal plants in Chile. So this is like the demands of the movement, and she brought it to the question, to her answer, including numbers, showing numbers and how many coal plants they want the government to shut down. So she clearly communicated the problem, how it is connected to other issues, how it is impacting other people's lives, what's the solution for that, and what is the demand, what are they asking the authorities to do. So this is a very good example of a good key messages and good interview that pass the messages on. You can move on now, Afifa, please. I'm a bit mindful of time now, so I'm gonna pass on a bit more fast right now. So delivery matters. Research says that content is less important than the presentation or how you present this. So the voice and your persona and your behavior, your attitude accounts for 90%, and the content of what you're saying only for 10%. So it's not only important what you're communicating, but also like how you are communicating that. So now, next, we're gonna look a bit into some tips for giving and preparing for an interview. So when you are preparing for an interview, get details on the setting from the journalist, if it's live or pre-recorded, the length of the interview, the program, any storyline or bias that you should be paying attention to, understand the media outlets, and if you will be up against anyone, if you're going to be debating with someone, and know the audience, know who you're talking to and what they want to hear or what is going to resonate with them. Second, develop your key messages and prepare for a specific Q&A. So try to understand what you should be asked and how you're going to answer to that. What are you most likely to get asked? Double check your statistics and numbers and have a source at hand. Always use, name the source of the numbers and facts that you're bringing. And check your opponents on social media, Twitter, for any arguments that they are likely to make, and be prepared for them. So start with the easy stuff and practice a lot. Don't need to elaborate setup, just practice what you're going to say. Find a quiet space and do what feels best and more comfortable. Next. Yeah, this is actually basically the same. So next. So as I said, like how you present something is also very important. So when you're speaking to broadcast media, especially television, how you look is also important. And you need to show confidence and personality and credibility. Journalists need to know that you're reliable, and the public needs to know that you're credible. So where something that you feel empowered, something that you feel comfortable and confident. In studio for TV, use makeup. I know it's boring. Some people doesn't like it, but for TV they need it. And yeah, no busy patterns, no shiny materials. Avoid black and white because it doesn't look good in studio, in studio lights. Next. Body language. This is something that really communicates. So sit on the edge of your seat, look directly at the camera or at this journalist, straight back, but also relax it, shoulders back, smile every time you can, focus on your breath, take your time, respect your own pace. And if you're on your phone, just stand up because your voice sounds better when you're standing up. Next. The voice. Take a nice deep breath before anything, before speaking, and start in a low pitch. Try to speak slowly. Listen to the end of each word you're saying. Smile when appropriate, even if it's a radio interview, because the sound of the voice when we are smiling sounds different, and people can imagine and understand that you're smiling. And aim for 45 seconds to 1 minute maximum answers. So having a very straightforward and concise and direct key messages are important also because of the time and the length of the interview. Next. Tech setup. Make sure you have a good internet connection. Test your microphone, your camera, put a camera at the eye level. Smile face where next to your camera. Frame your head so it's in the center. And also look at your background. What does the background say about who you are? So it's also important to look at the background. Don't be too close to the wall behind you, because it kind of it pushes back the image. And avoid light from just one side or a dark room. Try to also set up a good light when you are where you are. Next. So this is more focused on broadcasts and producers, but it's also a good tip for any kind of media relations. So use your social media to build up your profile as an activist or as a spokesperson. So a lot of journalists and producers are increasingly relying on social media to find people and check up their potential as spokespeople, and being vocal about issues that you work on or you care about on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, whatever it's most popular in your region, helps them to identify that you are an activist, and yeah, just share your opinion, be vocal about the issues you care about. And every time you can, just tag local and use hashtag to explain the subject. Next. Another good tip is to record a 1 minute video about yourself, who you are, where you work, what are the causes you're most passionate about. Yeah, just show producers and the people, the public, what you are like as a speaker, but also gives them confidence that you are a good spokesperson. And it's also great for practice. So you record a selfie video of 1 minute explaining what you do and why you do it and what's the problem, and also bring in your key messages. Next. Very briefly, the types of interviews that we have. We have on the ground, and this is generally when you're being interviewed at the site of something that is happening at that moment, like a town hall or a protest or a march, something that is happening at a site and you are there or close to that. There's another type of interview which is down the line for broadcast, and it means that when you are in a remote location doing an interview to camera or on the radio, while the presenter is in the studio somewhere else. So it's different locations. And in studio is where you go to an outlet studio and record the interview together in the same place with the presenter or the journalist. And generally is a one-on-one scenario, but sometimes it's a debate that has another guest. Yeah, next. for all of these for each of these types of interviews, that are specific tips, but for all of them, take a deep breath, speak slowly than you would normally, and remember that the message you have to remember what messages you have to say. During the interview day, general tips: prepare in advance and practice. Try to look at your state of mind, how you're feeling. Sometimes you're not feeling good to do an interview, so you can pass it on to someone else, or try to reschedule. Sometimes we can do that, sometimes we can't. And try to be confident. Know that you have your key messages, you have practice, you have the expertise, and you are worthy of being in that position. The more prepared you are, the less anxiety you will feel. So there's no need to over prepare, but it's always good to practice. Do a short breathing exercise before going on camera or on air, and check the sound before a live interview. Next. Finally, practice, practice, practice. Yeah, this is another exercise, but I think we are kind of running out of time here, because it would be like 5 to 7 minutes. That when I would ask this, and people would respond to specific questions. But I'll just leave it to open questions if you have any, or anything else that you'd like to stress, reinforce, ask, comment about the training, or if you have any previous experience with interviews or media relations, anything that you would like to ask, just feel free to jump in.
Okay, so I'll go then. Thank you so much, Natalia, honestly. So I've had some experiences actually recently in local TV where they invite me on with something specific, and they say, yes, this is what we're going to talk about. And then they switch totally to something political, and they blindside you. So that's a like Trinidad and Tobago perspective on certain stations. And this was on TV. And I don't think I was very prepared for that, because I was prepared for what they asked me to be interviewed on, and then they just swapped it over completely to become very political. So how do you deal with something like that? Because it's like it does get to you.
Yeah, this is a very good one. So I will refer back to that tricky questions slides when I spoke about the ABC technique. Acknowledge, bridge, and communicate. So they blindsided you. They invited you to something to speak about a specific topic, and then they just changed the whole thing. So you were not prepared. You have two options. To you on this matter, because I was not prepared to do that. And it's fair enough to say that, because they were not fair with you. Inviting you and then asking different questions. So this is one option. And the second option, if you think the topic is not too different from what you were prepared to, and that you can make a connection, you can just acknowledge what they're saying, and try to bridge to what you want to communicate. So for instance, if they're speaking about climate change, but then they change to like politicians or politics specific thing, but around climate change, you can say, no, this is not the most important thing. The most important thing is, and then communicate your key messages. Try to always bridge to what you want to communicate and what you're prepared to say. But if there's no connection at all between the subjects, just apologize and say, hey, I wasn't expecting this question, so I'll need to pass it on to someone else. Now, I know it's embarrassing because it's on TV, but if you don't know how to answer, it's best not to answer than to answer something that it's gonna embarrass you even more, you know. And you can blame, you can shame them online, live. You can say, I'm sorry, I need to apologize because I was invited to speak about something else, so I'm not prepared to do that. So you can shame them as well.
Thank you so much. So I'm saying Andreska.
Thank you. Andreska, over to you.
Yes, I was just about to say that I also had a similar experience. I was being interviewed on a case that I'm a part of, as an extension of a fair deal. And they started asking some really political questions, and it was very uncomfortable. But all I said is that the case of itself, climate change, clearing, it's not solely a political issue. So I just tried to like move away from politics. It's not exclusively political. It also concerns other things or whatever. And then I went on. So that's what I just tried to do that, but it was very uncomfortable still.
I didn't see the interview, but this, as you put it, was a perfect answer. Like you bridged that to what you know. It's worthy to and relevant to be shared. And also, I just want to say that when we are, because the media landscape is so dominated by, as I was saying in the beginning, white cisgender men from upper classes, and we are women, women of color, and a lot of marginalized identities, and they usually want to shame us and to make us feel uncomfortable in those situations. So sometimes being polite, but also like naming naming that you're feeling uncomfortable with, that is something that we need to do. And we need to say that you wouldn't be doing that if I was a man, and if I was I don't know, like someone else. So you're doing that because I'm a woman of color, and you need to respect me. You obviously you're not going to say that with these words, but with your arguments and showing them that you have the expertise and you know what you're doing, and that's why they invited you to be there. So sometimes I feel that it's a provocative, and that they are just trying to get us in our nerves, and we need to be calm, but also like make them realize that we know why they're doing that, and they're not gonna hit us because we know what we're doing, you know. So trying to bridge and always be polite, because the public is not doesn't have they doesn't have they're not blame it, they're not, it's not their fault that the presenter is making you uncomfortable, but sometimes it's good to name that, you know, to make it explicitly that they are making you uncomfortable, and that's not why you're there. That's not what you do. Go ahead.
Oh no, that was an accident. I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay, guys. I think that's it. Any other questions, final comments? Was this useful?
Oh, I have one question. I see this third question here. Do you really think politicians will listen? How would you answer that? Honestly, I feel like every other question can kind of be bridged well, but sometimes, especially in this case, like environmental issues, and you want your government to be held accountable. People throw that phrase around a lot, hold them accountable. And it seems impossible a lot of the time, but you also don't want to communicate to the public that you don't believe that they'll listen, because that kind of derails your entire argument. So how would you answer that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And this is always like, because we're activists and sometimes our work is seen as irrelevant, or you're just playing around, your youth, young people just playing around, go to work and do something relevant. They always ask us this. How I would answer that is referring back to who are politicians. Politicians are people that were put there, were put in positions of authority by the public, right? By the population, by us, ultimately. So they need to listen to us. And I would bring back the people power argument, because we are many, we are the ones who put them there. We voted for them. So if they want to stay in the position where they are, they need to listen to us. They need to be accountable. Otherwise, in the next elections, obviously, we're speaking about democratic context here, right? But in these cases, they need to listen to people's demands, and they need to be accountable to people. And people power can change every context, not only democratic context, but I will bring that, reinforce the power of people, the strength of people power, because, and bring in examples like how many fossil fuel projects we managed to stop only with like local communities protesting, or yeah, like how many banks we managed to convince to stop funding fossil fuel projects because of our power and our ability to argument and to show them with facts and the real impacts of what they're doing. So I would bring concrete examples of things that we are already doing and fronts where we are already winning, to show them that people power can win and that politicians can need to listen to people. Otherwise, they won't be where they are. This is my answer, but I would be happy to hear any other suggestions on that, because it's indeed something that we are very often asked.
I think that was a great answer, but I also want to know, just a follow-up from that question, if someone were to ask maybe, okay, so they're supposed to listen to us, but what if they don't? Then I guess the answer would be that, well, they won't be voted for in the next elections or something like that. It's likely that they won't, or?
Yeah, that's what we have in our power, right? We have the power to vote for them or not. So if they don't listen to us, we will probably not vote for them in the next election, and we will not rest until they do listen to us. I think that's another very relevant point. Like, we won't stop until I think that's the people power side of things as well. Like, we won't stop. We won't be defeated. We won't stop until things change, until world leaders change policies, change behaviors, and make the transition and do things that need to be done.
Thank you.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. This was really enlightening, and I hope you enjoyed and that's useful for you. you can have both the presentation and the media toolkit. So I think Amira or FIFA can share with you afterwards. And I'm also open for any follow-up questions or comments that you might have in the coming days. Feel free to reach out. I can share my email or my WhatsApp contact, anything. So I'm open.
Thank you so much, Natalia. This was a great session. And I really loved all the questions that we got. And I think the discussion, it's really helpful for all of us, especially when it came to talking to our governments and the last questions in terms of bridging our work and it getting deviated with political kind of persons shifting it to just the political side of things. I think that's a big challenge. So I'm really happy that we were able to touch on that. We will definitely share the presentation and the recordings with everyone. And we'll also copy you in the email so persons can have your contact if they want to reach out. But this has been great. And thank you all so much for joining. Take care. If any last questions, any last comments, feel free to go ahead. Otherwise, it was a great evening with you all.
Thank you all very much. Speak soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.